Thank you all for joining us today. We have a wonderful Caron panel of experts with us. This is part one of part two of Hard Conversations. Hard Conversations is a panel of our leading experts here to help us have these conversations with our children and better prepare us for the hard discussions that parents face today. My name is Eric Rodriguez. I'm the Education Director with Caron Treatment Centers. I focus on corporate and industry education, Master's in Social Work, Certified Advanced Addiction and Drug Counselor, and great recovering alcoholic and addict. We have with us today, we have Dr. Ramona Roberts. She is the Executive Director of Caron's Outpatient Treatment Program. She has her doctorate in psychology, clinical psychology, and is currently a level 2 certified trauma specialist. She is an author. She just wrote a wonderful book, I believe it was released last year, Making Sense of What Hasn't Made Sense. And most recently, it is the counselor, she got an award, the Counselor's Choice Award, which is fantastic. Congratulations to you.
Know that. You're amazing. Thank
She
you.
is amazing. We also have Bethany Franklin. She is the lead family therapist for Caron Treatment Center's residential programs. She's a licensed social worker and certified advanced alcohol and drug counselor. She's also has a master's in education in human sexuality and is a rainbow advocate. So thank you so much for being here today, Bethany. Christopher OWSIANY, he is the clinical director of men's treatment at our Caron residential treatment program. He holds a master's degree in clinical counseling, a certified alcohol and drug counselor, and is a certified clinical supervisor. He has over 2 decades of experience with adolescent care, young adult care, adult care. He has, I know, 2 decades, a wealth of knowledge and experience in talking about these issues. So thank you so much for being here. And Karen LENGEL, she is our student assistance prevention specialist for Caron Treatment Centers. She joined us in 2017. She has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Alvernia University, and she specializes in nicotine cessations in our student assistance programs. One of our unsung heroes, really battling this on our in our schools and with our children every day. So thank you so very much for being here. I'm going to kick this to Gretchen, who is going to introduce ourselves, and then we're going to get started today. So thank you all.
I'm Gretchen HAGENBUCH. I am the regional coordinator for the student assistance program. I have a master's degree in education. I'm a certified prevention specialist. I also am in recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. And I am so excited about this panel being together because the people watching this have no idea how cool and rare it is for this group of people to get together. Everything from inpatient to outpatient to boots on the ground with Caron, it's just amazing. So we're going to start it off with a question for Dr. Roberts, and everyone is welcome to chime in. But the question is like, why are children so moody? Okay, like the parents that are listening to this are going to identify with the fact that kids just never seem to want to talk. And if you do talk to them about making healthy choices, they tend to get really annoyed. So how do we find the balance of starting conversations with kids, but not pushing too hard?
I think first the term moody, right? Like when we hear that term moody, and we all use that. We use that for our partners, our friends, our coworkers. Oh, we're just moody today. I think even just the lens we use to look at our kids is going to set us up and shape us to kind of elicit a certain response, right? So if we're seeing it as moody, then that's going to probably arouse something in us that makes us respond to being moody a certain way, rather than if we're able to maybe kind of reframe it as they're having a probably developmentally appropriate response, right? And then depending on their age we're talking about, but that might help us have a little more like empathy in the moment, right? I mean, let's say a 13-year-old, oh, yeah, this would be expected at this time. even outside of all the other factors that like we're challenged with right now in society. I mean, like, you know, are we out of the pandemic? I never know how to say this. Like, is the pandemic over? Are we out of it? Are we on the other side? But whatever the language is, like, we're still coming out of or through the pandemic. You got those challenges. You got challenges with, you know, peers and the bullying that is out there, and the demands that are placed on parents, right? So it's like parents are having to juggle so many different hats, and then maybe sometimes forgetting how that trickles down to the kids. And so sometimes the moodiness can be like, I'm trying to show you, hey, I'm still here. If they're, let's say, irritability or anger and aggression, slamming doors, cursing at you. Sometimes slamming doors is like, hey, I'm here. I want a voice, right? And sometimes as parents, we can forget when we're trying to juggle all these things. We have to wear so many hats, right? Sometimes, you know, shouting things at you is like, maybe it's their own internal struggle that they're dealing with in the moment, right? They're cursing at you, or they're saying, I hate you, right? You know, how many parents have heard that, right? Or we've said that to our parents, right? And maybe in the moment, it's like, no, I really am hating myself right now in this present moment, but I don't know how to manage that emotional pain. So it's easier for me to say I hate you and put it externally out, you know, out to you. So, and sometimes I think our kids really just need some moments to themselves, and we forget, right? As adults, like we forget sometimes we like our downtime or our time to decompress, or what we do to cope with our challenges, and just remembering that like sometimes the kids have to carve that out for themselves, and they don't even know what that is yet, you know?
So do you think sometimes it's best to not push, like not, I have this vision of parents following their child because their child is not responding to them. So the parents like stomping after them. Is it best to like let them have their space and then revisit it later?
Might be in some situations. It's so funny as you just said that. You know what image came to mind is the It's a Wonderful Life, when the kid is continually pulling on the dad's jacket, daddy, you know,
Yeah.
or excuse me. I think it's like, excuse me, and finally he's like, excuse you for what, you know?
Yeah, leave me alone, kid.
Yeah, like Zuzu's pedals she was trying to show him,
Yeah.
right? It's like, as parents, sometimes we're that person tugging on the, excuse me, I want to talk to you. And I think sometimes we do have to, I think what happens for us as parents is we might slip into this idea of needing to have control. And if we let that kid walk away and shut the door in our face, or have a little bit of an attitude that we're losing control and we need to assert that back into the situation. Hey, I said I wanted to talk. Well, that kid might not be ready to talk right now. And what you're going to do is escalate into a situation that it didn't have to go into. And I think for us, one of the most important things for us to remember as our kids, if we're talking, let's say teens, as our kids are shifting into the preteen teen years, what they're striving for is independence, but independence doesn't mean like no relationship with the family, no respect. And I think for us, it's really important to focus on not trying to have control over the kids, but trying to have connection with the kids. If we keep connection in mind, that can help us in those moments when we actually need to respect the walking away and say, you know what, if I walk away and give them this moment, is that going to preserve my connection with them rather than my efforts being to control the situation?
So that, thank you. Go ahead, Eric.
No, that's amazing. I love what you said, and especially about like that, you know, internally, like, is it about you or is it about the kid? Because like, if it's about you and it's just about your reaction, we need to have some insight about in parenting about ourselves and really know ourselves to be able to parent effectively. Right. I just wanted to hear from also from like the other panelists of like what your thoughts are, because there's a lot there. Thank you, Dr. Roberts. You just unpacked a whole bunch. I was like listening to you at the front, was like, man, I am tired thinking about being a parent to my daughter right now.
Yeah, I was appreciating everything you said too, and thinking about as a parent how that control piece is so important, and we probably don't have 100% control over the interaction, though we have control over ourselves, and we have a responsibility to try to create an environment that's going to foster communication. And that's probably not chasing somebody down the hallway or, taking the door off the hinges when someone slams it in our face, or, barking back when someone says, I hate you. I think, we need to have the emotional intelligence when working with kids, teenagers who are really trying to figure all this stuff out, as you painted, to have control over ourselves, to have some understanding, where are we going to go with this stuff? If we're a part of the equation too, we have, maybe we're moody at times, maybe. And what do we do with our own moodiness? And if our kids are moody, how does that bump into ours? And trying to at least control our side of the street, to kind of borrow some recovery language in these interactions, to just do the best we can to make an environment that might work.
I always have to tell myself to not respond to a middle schooler with my middle school self, because sometimes I feel like that is what happens, and I have to be the adult, which is exhausting. Caron, I think of you in all of this, and one of the reasons that we invited Caron LENGEL on this is not only does she work with students talking about making healthy decisions and pushing them to be better people, but she has a daughter who has struggled with exactly this topic and is gratefully making really good decisions now. But Caron, how did you manage helping your daughter or any of your children handle the word no? How do you know when to say no? And how do you know when to say, trust them, and you're scared about the kids they may be hanging out with? How do you just handle overcoming the fear around not wanting to be like a jailer, giving them freedom, but also being kind of scared in some of the decision making they're making?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really hard, but
okay, next question. Just kidding.
I did kind of want to say something kind of to piggyback off what Dr. Roberts was saying, which was giving time to maybe process. So that maybe because my expectation is that I want to talk about this right now, that maybe that's not where they're at right now, but to be confident enough maybe in your relationships, or to trust enough in your relationship to know that they will come to you when the time is right, to just sort of respect the fact that maybe they need some processing, and to, like I said, be confident enough to know that they will reach out to you when their time is right, when it's time for them and they're ready to talk about it.
All right. I wanted to also point out something that Chris, that you said about we could be moody too, right? I think it's important for us to remember that we have moody and bad days, right? Again, we could change the word, but we have bad days. And I think it's important for us to remember that our kids don't have the cognitive capabilities to sort out the complexities of our bad days. And what happens is, when we don't recognize what our bad day is trickling down to the people in our household, right? For our kids in particular, they see that as a real-time reflection of themselves in that moment, right? Especially if we then go a little younger, right? And so I think it is important for us to remember that we have the bad days too, and to keep that in mind as we try to empathize. And I think, Caron, what you said about giving them that space, allowing them to come to you in your time, I love that. If I can highlight, marker that piece and help people understand that when you've got a kid who's escalated, they're going up, right? And now you're feeling the intensity and you're like, I'm not going to let them slam the door and be in their room, and I'm going to walk away? No, I'm going to meet them with the same rise up. Hey, you, right? I'm going to meet them with the same escalation. Well, wait, two escalations don't make a de-escalation, right? And so I think if we can remember, like Caron's saying, that maybe there is a better time to have the conversation. So maybe they were disrespectful. But if I try to come at them rising with the, hey, you're being disrespectful and this is unacceptable, I'm not going to accept it in this moment and so on and so on, I'm not going to get them to not be disrespectful. We're going to now battle even further. So instead, like, take the space. When things have de-escalated and the dysregulation has come back into being regulated, then we can have the conversation about, hey, what happened earlier today or what happened last night, we need to talk about.
It's like, as the adults, we're more able to handle discomfort of the allowing them to walk away. And what, like, as Caron said, that time before they come back is really uncomfortable. And there's really just no winning in chasing after them, right? So, Caron, back to handling the balance between no and trust and being, keeping them home because at least you know they're safe, and then realize, you know, and otherwise they're going to have to just follow their own path. Like, how do you decide when it's time to say no or to trust?
I told you that was a hard question.
I'm sorry, I know you tried to get out of it.
I think basically it's to trust yourself, and to not second guess what you know as to be right. And then when saying no, or being concerned that if you say no, you know, all the different things that could or could not happen because of that, to not make it a fear-based decision. If it's more specific to friends, and I'm sure you all have an opinion on this, but for me, I think you can only control so much. But what I've found through trial and error is that I've tried to sort of teach all of my kids that oftentimes you're guilty by association. So if you're choosing the right friends, or what I would consider, or what our house would consider to be the right friends, that you won't kind of fall into a bad way. So if there's friends though that you're around and you aren't taking part in what those friends are doing, but you're with those friends and they go down, you're going down as well. So that's kind of where I come from with, and sometimes I have had to let them learn by kind of falling on their face with that. Like, yeah, you know what, you were with this group of kids and this group of kids did it, but you didn't do it, but you were with them. So you went down with them. Fortunately, it hasn't gotten to the point where it's been anything with, you know, involving law or anything like that. But, you know, school issues in school where they might be in with a crowd that maybe they shouldn't be. And, you know, and they just have to kind of fall on their face sometimes on their own, learn it that way.
I think about resiliency skills when you're like talking about that. I just had a whole conversation about, like, you know, we can't fix all the problems for our children, and giving them the opportunity to make healthy decisions, but also giving them the opportunity to also maybe make some poor decisions. But if our messaging is consistent, it's going to ultimately be able to go, hey, first and foremost, like, I can look at my parent as not necessarily like a governance in this household or like a taskmaster in this household, but they're trying to help me to make healthy decisions and positive choices in my life, and they're also not going to make them for me. And sometimes the result of that is a great teaching moment, not for us because it's not about the parent necessarily, but for the child to go, hey, this happened, and I should maybe make a different choice, or in a situation in the future, now I've learned this and I can make a different choice, and building that resiliency and that ability to overcome. When you were talking, I just thought about that you're talking about that resiliency piece in your household. It's pretty amazing.
As I'm listening to you, Eric and Caron, I think about, right, it kind of goes back to the idea of control. And I think I'm going to use an analogy that my husband, oh gosh, if I tell him I use this analogy, so the analogy is like crabs in a barrel. And I think if you ever watch Crabs in a Barrel, I mean, I've gone crabbing, I'm a water person, I don't know whoever's been crabbing, but if you look at Crabs in a Barrel, the crab is trying to get out, right? So you have a crab that's like trying to climb on the other crab, stepping on the other crab, trying to get out, right? So I like to use this analogy and how my husband uses it, especially in the teen years, because I think if we come from the angle of your friends don't care about you, they're not thinking of you and your well-being, the first response you're going to get from your kid is, you don't know my friends, mom, you don't understand them, and then you don't understand me. Because if we think of one of Elkind's concepts of the personal fable, it's that my story is unique, no one else could possibly understand. And boy, do parents find their way to fall right into that trap, right? And so we can remember that that's what's happening in their brain. And how much they value their friends. We have to be careful how we talk about their friend group, even when they are, like, from the objective point of view, really not a good group, or there's some trouble happening there. That analogy, I think, is helpful to help them see, look, it's not that your friends don't care about you. It's not that they're not thinking, but sometimes they're thinking of themselves to survive in a situation that you also get, kind of like you said, Caron, the guilty by association, they get caught up in the same situation. And it maybe wasn't that their friend wanted them to get in trouble or wanted them to do something bad or wanted something to happen to them, but it happened nonetheless, because at least that won't push you away, in that conversation of your friends are bad for you.
Wow. That was great. And I love Crabs in a Barrel. It's like they're literally pulling them, other people, like other crabs, down to get out, right?
Yeah.
So this brings me to something that I think Chris could probably help us with. It's sort of like adult decisions versus the wishes of kids. Like, it is not uncommon for a child to come to their parent with concerns about the behavior of one of their friends, whether it's alcohol or drugs, and the parent should feel good because they're trusted, right? But then they find themselves in a situation where they need to make an adult decision, but the kid doesn't want necessarily the parent to make any decision. They just want to talk about it. Like, how would you advise parents handling a situation like that, Chris?
Well, I think what you said, I'd try to underline that as many times as I could, how great it is, kid, that you could come and talk to me. First of all, I think that's huge for any of us. I was thinking back to our kind of our previous talk about, like, what's going on with my kids, and just the value of knowing the kids that my kids are hanging out with. And that's not the whole solution, but just being able to know some of these people, being able to know the kids and the parents both, to whatever degree that we can. The other people are going to be in our kids' lives when we're not there. So I think that's not a whole answer, but that's part of it, is just starting to know some of these other people and having relationships, knowing the kids on whatever, the team, or the kids that play music with my kid, and knowing their parents, because these things are going to come up. And I think there's, we're not going to be able to make everybody happy in that scenario either. I think that's a place to understand where you are as a parent. I can't keep my kid's secret and keep you safe all the time. They don't go together. If you're telling me about some behaviors that are going on, there's some concerns, I might need to do something with that. So I think being okay with being uncomfortable is really important. I think having some courage that you might need to have some of these conversations with the parents of other kids is really important. Expecting that our kids are going to be able to deal with these things on their own, to me, is just foolish. We can kind of hope that they will, but they can't. They're not developed to a point, cognitively, where they're going to be able to make all of those good choices. And we probably don't need to say it to them quite like that, because that's going to be insulting, as Dr. Roberts told us about a minute ago, if we insult their friends. But understanding we're going to have to do some of these things is important. I think we can't rely on schools to do these things. Schools know about some stuff, but they're not in charge of, policing our kids. So getting okay with being uncomfortable and starting some of these conversations, I think, is where where at least I would start to answer your question,
Yeah.
Gretchen.
I
Um,
think Chris, you said having conversations with other parents. I as a parent, I almost think of like that being almost a harder conversation. How much conflict actually happens from parent to parent, especially when you start to bring kids involved in it, and start to have maybe conflicting ideas on what might be going on. Those are the conversations personally that I actually get more anxious about than necessarily even having the conversation with the kid themselves.
And Eric, too, to think about, I hear you on that, because if another parent calls me to talk to me about my kid, immediately walls are going to go up, right? Protective parent, right? And also liking to think what my kid is really doing and what they're not doing, right? So I think we need to think of that as we make the phone call and we reach out to the other parent that the parent of the kid we're concerned about. Watch how we deliver that. You have to think that parent is probably going to be scared, overwhelmed, angry. So really be mindful to watch your judgmental statements. Your kid did this, right? Blaming or accusatory and judgment, and like, how could you let this happen? Whatever it might be in the delivery, just to be mindful, because they have to take this in and receive this and then figure out what they have to do with their kid. It's a whole process. And I think we have to be really delicate in how we communicate that to another parent. And I also think too, when that kid is coming to tell, yes, what you said, Chris, like, can we just like stand on that for a second? What you said, Gretchen, about, man, that they're actually bringing this info to you. Sit with that for a second and think how great that is. And then also think about the possibility that they might truly indeed be bringing you something of another kid. They might be bringing you something that is of another kid, one of their friends, and them. My friend started dabbling in this, and they are, but they're not adding that piece. They might be testing the waters to see what your response is about their friend. And you might have a safety response, a concern, but again, watching our judgment and shaming, because you judge and shame their friend. In that moment, you're judging and shaming them. And that's the last of your communication line. And then they know what not to share with you and what not to bring with you. Sometimes they're really just testing the waters and they hope you meet the challenge, right? Sometimes they'll push boundaries in hoping that you meet them on the other side, with always being there and being supportive. So I just think, keep that in mind. It may very well be their friend, right? Not everything do you have to think, is this really your friend or is this you we're talking about? It might really be their friend, but there might be some situations that could be dealing with them as well. Or maybe it's their friend now, but your response to that situation is going to play a key role if a year from now this situation plays out in them and they need to reach out for help.
And I think that just to add to this, like, we have to be very mindful and delicate when we are brave enough to deliver the information about the concern of another person's child. But as a parent, we have to also be prepared that we may at some point get a phone call, that we may be picking up the phone, and whatever response would be our natural response, the wall, you're wrong, you don't know my child. Really, our response should be, thank you. Thank you for caring about my kid. This is awkward. And we hope that the parent who's delivering that information isn't going to gossip about it, right? There isn't a parent group I am in front of that there isn't concerns about gossiping and information coming out sideways. And we just need to be more brave, right? Yeah. Bethany, I'm going to jump to you because something Caron said a little bit ago, which I just love. Like, Caron, you referred to something as how our household, like you have house values, the values that you instill in your kids. I just love that term. Like, the whole family is united because somehow the adults have passed down these values. What happens when there's divorce? Like, we have, we have topics about kids not talking to us, and we have talked a little bit about, anxiety and stuff. And then we've talked about what is our stuff and what's young people's stuff and boundaries. But how do we help a child navigate through a divorce in a way that is the least damaging to them?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that can be the most damaging is when parents talk poorly about the other parent, or try to get the kids involved and triangulate the situation. I think the best thing that we can do to support the kids are keep those lines of communication open. Encourage them to come to you with any questions or concerns that they may have, and really try our best to not talk negatively about the other parent or try to bring them into a situation. Maybe it's finding them resources, getting them a therapist, something like that to help support them, helping them see that they're not the only children that do have divorced parents, that it is a pretty common thing, and that there are other people that they can reach out to talk to, maybe some other safe adults in their life or other kids their age that they can go to talk to as well. So I think we have to keep those lines of communication open for any questions they may have, any concerns they may have, validate their feelings, and make sure that we're still being respectful of the other parent in those conversations.
It's like
I love
being
I love your solution focused. It's like all solution focused. Like
Oh.
you just gave like 10 like of the greatest tips for like, having clear communications and boundaries and like normalizing, conflict and, leaning into like health, what are the healthy, the healthy individuals and adults and children. Like what an amazing, it just so simply expressed so many great opportunities to kind of drive that. So thank you for that. That was such a succinct way of saying that.
I will say that I am a product of a divorce that I'm in my 50s, and it's still the way that the parent, like my mom, used my dad against me, damaged my relationship with my father, and it never recovered. He's now passed away, but I never got it back because of this weird loyalty that my mother basically instilled in me. And it's just, it was her stuff. Like, as adults, we really need to check our own behavior and our own intentions. And that's hard to do. I want Bethany to be my mom, because look how clear that was. That was so clear. So Bethany, we're going to stick with you since you're so clear. We think about the things that parents bump into. They might have, obviously their child might have struggles with drugs and alcohol and bullying, but what if our child comes home and says that they're questioning their sexuality or their gender, and this is something that you didn't expect, or you weren't prepared? Like, what do you recommend a parent do?
I think it starts when they're young. I think that we have to kind of normalize those conversations and the fact that there are people that exist in the world that are transgender, that are, part of the LGBTQ community, and kind of normalizing that lifestyle for children, not, banning them from watching certain movies with LGBTQ characters. So kind of making that seem like it is normal, because it is. And when they have questions about it, being honest about those answers, about, what's really going on. So I think that they're more likely to come to you about questioning their sexual orientation or their gender identity if they know that you're going to be supportive. But I know sometimes that does throw family members kind of for a loop if it's something that they're not expecting. And I would say that we can respond with validating their feelings, thank them for coming to us with this information and trusting us with this information. We can ask them what they need. What do you need from me in this moment to help you feel supported? Do you need me to help connect you to resources? Maybe at the local LGBTQ center, we get them in a support group or something like that. What do they need in terms of, school services? So kind of asking them what they need. And sometimes parents struggle with potentially their own homophobia or transphobia or, not my kid. So I think we have to, as parents, not kind of put that on the child once they come to us. We have to do our own work. So maybe we need to see a therapist for ourselves and kind of evaluate how we're going to process this information so that we're not projecting negative stereotypes or beliefs on our child.
Which absolutely, that behavior that you're encouraging parents not to do could 100% turn a child toward substance use, right?
Mhm.
Which is why traditionally that community has been so, my community has been so involved with alcohol and drug abuse because, societal homophobia, right? And not, as parents, not hearing the words that come from our child and then filtering it through, what does that mean about my ability to parent, right? It's not everything is about you. And I think that it's natural for us to be like constantly checking, my hairdresser, I spend the whole time reassuring her she's a good parent. And the fact that she's even thinking and questioning whether she's a good parent tells me she's a good parent, right? Speaking of alcohol and drugs, so a lot of times, Dr. Roberts, we get, and please anyone chime in on this, we get questions from parents about maybe there's a family history of substance abuse, and they want to educate their child and inform them, but they don't know the right age to start talking to their kids about that particular thing, or even the right age to even start bringing up the topic of making healthy decisions around alcohol and drugs. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I actually think the younger the better.
Okay.
Because you're normalizing the conversation around it. They're less afraid than at 14 to come and say something to you because they've been having conversations with you about substances for years. Even Caron might appreciate, this is our nicotine cessation person, that I remember telling, I can vividly remember talking to our son, who is late teen right now. When he was about 4 years old, we were at a park. I can remember the conversation, and he saw a cigarette on the ground, and it prompted a conversation for me about it. And I also tried to hold what I said earlier in my head about making sure I don't talk bad about friends, right? So one of the things I said throughout the conversation was about how, a friend might offer you something to try when you're older, like one of these cigarettes on the ground, right? And the friend might not even have any clue why it's a bad thing. So again, not trying to say like this friend is trying to get you to do something bad. Your friends might not realize the consequences of things. You think about the teenager who's got a teen who says, here, try this pill I got, right? They're not thinking that this friend is trying to do something to harm them, right? So I think, again, if we take it out of the line of conversation around like, some bad people are going to try and get you to do bad things. No, good people will try and get you to do bad things because they don't recognize it as being a bad thing because of maybe how it was shared with them, right? So, I was talking to my kids at 4 years old around cigarettes. Now, granted, I'm not going to throw in heroin, at age 4. So you think about developmentally appropriate. Alcohol and cigarettes might be the first 2 drugs you're talking to your child about because of, the legality around that and how much more it's seen, right? They see that maybe at the dinner table, they see that in the stores, they see, an aunt and uncle, or so those might be the first 2. So I think with some developmental appropriateness at how you're having the conversation and what you're sharing and what you're telling them, but to open the door as early as possible.
That's great. Go ahead.
Could I jump in? I just wanted to just really appreciate the nuance there. I can remember some discussions like that I've had with my own kids and the danger of, oh, cigarettes are bad. Well, okay, well then how come this person, I've seen them smoke a cigarette, or alcohol is bad. Well, what about, grandpa's having a beer at dinner? Is he bad? So just being ready as a parent for that, like that discussion and that just that level of nuance and being able to describe, no, it's not that that person's bad, but this is how this is going to probably show up in your life. Just how important that is. I appreciate the way you delivered that, Dr. Roberts. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you.
You guys are like talking so much about language. It's this amazing thing as I sit back and just like how purposeful language is and how we're communicating to other parents, to children especially, and the age of these conversations. I as Bethany was talking, and then Dr. Roberts and subsequently Chris, of like, if you're starting to verbalize like this is wrong, or these people are bad, or that lifestyle is we don't appreciate that lifestyle, and we talk negatively or anecdotally about those kinds of things early on in adolescence, when these things come up for our children later on, or maybe in the moment, but certainly later on, they're going to have ideas and ideas about their parents that, is this wrong? Is this bad? Am I a bad person if I do this? And if you're engaged in any kind of behavior or lifestyle or anything, you're going to ultimately start to take on some of those belief systems internally yourself, and can drive a lot of some negative self-talk behaviors, addiction, and suicidality, and lots of other mental health crises that we now sadly see is increasing in our youth. So I really appreciate the clarity, communication, and really being able to speak to that throughout your child's life, versus trying to solve an issue that might occur at 14 when you should have been having those conversations at 5, 6, 7, 8, and been purposeful with what you're saying in your language then.
And Eric, I totally want to follow that up too. As you're saying that about language, it also made me think about what we don't say. Ooh. So if I can highlight that piece too. Ooh. For substance use, Bethany talking about LGBTQ, transgender, race, right? And racism and disabilities. What we don't say to our kids, they internalize that message, right? So Ooh. When we're not talking about things, our kids internalize and create their own message of, well, because mom never talks about these kind of people, because dad never talks about these kind of people, because they never talk about this, that must mean something bad about them, or they don't like them, or they don't approve of them. So sometimes we forget that we deliver messages without words by not talking. And I'm often talking about this, around diversity issues. So with racism, right? And thinking, well, they're going to learn from what they see in our environment. So if I don't have someone in my environment that has a different skin color than me, it actually behooves me to talk more about race to counter the internalized message they're already taking, right? If I don't have anyone that identifies as lesbian in my group of friends, right, it behooves me to make sure I make a conscious effort to have a conversation, because when this person goes off and meets someone that uses substances, that has a disability, that is Black, that is lesbian, right, you name it, fill in the blank, they're coming from whatever message was internalized. And then we might be surprised later. I never taught them that. I never taught them to judge these people, but I also didn't teach them not to judge these people.
It's like making them familiar without them being actually familiar. You're speaking positively about people that they may have not met yet, so that when they meet them, it's like, oh, I feel like I've known you, right?
There's gaps like in like where you think about like your environment and where you live, and who you're around, and what schools you go to, and what community you're a part of, and there's gaps there. And I really appreciate Dr. Roberts kind of saying, hey, we have to bridge the gap. And if there isn't those individuals or that socioeconomic kind of perspective in our community, we should take it's more important than ever to really be able to educate ourselves and press that narrative forward so that our kids and ourselves are aware. And we're going to have to do that more with maybe the individuals, the societal structure, the cultural structure, different things that might not necessarily be present in our community, that are present in the world, because our kids and ourselves are going to face those as well, maybe just not in our home.
I actually had an adult say to me just the other day, because we were talking about addiction, and she said to me, I never grew up with this. I never saw anyone like using substances in my community, in my family. And then the judgment sentence that came next, I had to put myself in her shoes for a second and say, where's that statement coming from? Well, you just gave it to me. You never grew up around anyone with this challenge. And so how can you wrap your head around it and understand them and not judge them through the lens you just did? So, you know, because she's not in that environment doesn't mean we don't ever talk about it, right?
So it seems like the hardest part of hard conversations is the language we use. Like, hard conversations become much easier when we do the best we can to pick words that bring us together, that are not judgmental. Hard conversations are easier when we pick the right time to do it and give each other space. What else did you hear?
I think, Gretchen, too, if I could add to that list, I was trying to sum it up in like a one word or a 2-word, but being willing to apologize when we use the wrong words is a huge asset for a parent, right? And to also recognize there's a lot of issue around intention right now. It comes around in different analogies. The most common one is if I step on your toe and I break your toe and you're complaining to me about how bad your toe hurts, and I put the focus on me. I never do that, I promise. I'm really mindful of my space and I never step on people's toes. I didn't mean to. Well, the focus being on me and I didn't mean to does not help the fact that we got a bleeding toe right now or a broken toe that needs to be wrapped. Instead, the attention now is on me and not the person I hurt. So my intention means diddly squat in that moment, right? And sometimes we do that as a defense because we want to be seen as good people. But when we make judgmental comments, racist comments, comments that are just offensive to our kids, for a kid to see us being willing to apologize and
100%.
make it not about us. And I need reminders of that too. Like, please, everything that I'm saying up here on this platform doesn't mean I'm a perfect parent. Oh my gosh, I wish I could like record myself. Can I put that on? Can I play the YouTube clip back for me when I need the reminders later, right? Like, we all goof, we make mistakes, but I think our willingness to have humility in that and actually self-reflect and you know what? I played that situation wrong. I totally goofed on that one, effed up. Yeah. I need to figure out how to make it right.
Right. Right. And if there's a parent that's listening to this that maybe wishes they could have a do-over in how they've been doing things or saying particular words, you can change the rules midstream. I was wrong. I've been doing it incorrectly. I've learned some things moving forward. Chris, were you going to say something?
I was just going to add quickly, I think understanding our own upbringing and our own biases that we bring to all these interactions is really important too. They're not always apparent, but you know, we were kids too. We went through all this stuff too. We had all these experiences and, you know, some of them probably helped us be more understanding and careful about choosing our words, and other ones probably made it so that it was even harder for us to say the right thing. So understanding where we're coming from, our own biases, our own lens we're looking through is really important.
Yeah, and Gretchen, if I can go back to you saying the do-over, you can change the rules midway. Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I don't think it's a bad idea that sometimes, so I think you can go either way. One, you just start changing the rules, change how you're doing things, right? I think it's also totally okay if you talk to your kid about how you're changing the rules, right? How you're changing how you maneuver the life game, right? That we're moving through together. Because, you know, there's been moments where I sat down with one of my kids and like, you know what, like, I have been doing this wrong. I think I need to switch this up. I've learned something from you. I think it's totally okay to have that conversation with your kid. Like, maybe it's I learned something from you. Maybe it's I learned something from talking with some other parents. And you know what? Like, I think I want to change how we navigate these conversations together. I think I want to change how I respond to you, whatever it might be, fill in the blank, but absolutely allow yourself the do-over and allow yourself the conversation. Because again, that shows humility. That shows your apology.
Because they know we make mistakes. They know that we don't know what we're doing all the time. And if we don't admit it, it's just, we're like a player. It's just like, just admit it.
We're a fraud.
Yeah, we're a total fraud.
It becomes robotic, and one of the keys is like showing your own humanity, and like that you're human and we make mistakes, and that's a learning opportunity as well. Because if you don't show that to your child, it's hard for your child to build the skills that goes, okay, well, everything's got to be perfect, everything's got to be good. Nothing can be bad, nothing can be wrong. I can't make mistakes, which just then perpetuates other issues.
Which is one of the reasons that we're seeing such an issue with mental health among adolescents, right? Any final words?
I just would love to say, going off of what everyone else said, as far as being vulnerable enough to admit that you made a mistake, and just that you want to try to reframe this whole the conversation and say that you're sorry, and to let your child know that if you're making mistakes, you're not expecting perfection from them either, and that's okay. It's okay to be wrong, and it's okay to admit it, but then the important part then is to start over and do it the better way.
Right. I saw you nodding your head when Dr. Roberts was talking, and I was like, oh, Caron is identifying with something right now.
That's huge, because I think that it just makes you so much more relatable to your kids. Can relate to you so much better when they see that. And that's not just your kids, that's that's across the board. That goes through, like, even in when I take it like to groups, like when I'm working with kids in the schools, to do it that way as well. Oh, I never thought about it that way. Well, let's think about it your way for a minute, or to open up that conversation that way. You're just so much more relatable then.
I love that, Caron. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Caron, no, if you I'm thinking about like your role in the schools, and say that there's new language that a child's bringing home to school, and you come in contact with a parent who's then starts to express, hey, my kid's been saying all these things, it's wonderful, they're changing. I feel like I might have done something wrong, and they explain to you a situation where they feel a great deal of maybe guilt or remorse for a situation that they've been through. What would you say to that parent?
Give yourself some grace, first of all. None of us are perfect, and to just kind of, I think, sometimes learning from your kid, like truly, I mean, and I say that to my kids in group as well. There's oftentimes that, I may come in here and think that I'm going to teach you something, but at the end of our session, you taught me. So just allowing that kind of freedom to have that conversation.
We're so comfortable with letting kids teach us about technology and fixing the Zoom, but then when it comes to learning love from our kids, or acceptance of other people from children, or other things, we're so much more uncomfortable with that. But they do have a lot to teach us. Yeah.
I can think of this story I put in my book, and I learned from both my kids, and my oldest, I learned how to look at the expression of emotions differently because he's someone that would probably use the label more as an introvert, and I'm total extrovert, if you can't tell.
Really?
Like
Really?
yeah, right, Gretchen. So I've had to navigate like his expression of emotions or lack thereof, or different expression, that I can't see it through the same lens as mine, so that I don't take it personal because, oh, he's not as excited as I'm excited, or no, his excitement is somewhere different in there, right? But I'm also thinking of, the part I put in my book was she was 7 at the time, and she was really sad. And man, like the words that night, I asked her why she was sad. And my husband had been sick and couldn't like tuck her into bed and sing her, nighttime songs or whatever. And she said, "I'll tell you why I'm sad, but you can't try to fix it."
Whoa.
I was just like, wait, what did you just say? And then she told me like why she was sad, that, she missed daddy. And I was like, you got a right to be sad. Like, so it just stood out to me too, and let them teach us. And that really taught me, there've been many moments with each of my kids that I've had to let them teach me, be willing to let them teach me. And I think, the part about give them grace, if I just had some, my final remarks, I think it's okay, as you said, Caron, it's okay to show them you're not perfect. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to have bad days, because if you allow that for yourself, you're allowing that for your kid. You're letting them see it's okay to not be perfect, and it's okay to not be okay sometimes. And I think really, the final thought for me is you can change the script at any point, going back to what you said, Gretchen, right? Change the script today, tomorrow, each day. You have a new opportunity to change the script, change how it plays out.
Excellent. I want to spend all day with you, Dr. Roberts.
Let's hang out.
Outpatient YMSing.
Yeah,
You can spend all day with her.
Yeah, wait, I don't want to have to
Come over to Caron
relapse to do
Outpatient.
that.
We're right here. YMSing, come see us.
Woo!
Any other final remarks from Chris or Bethany before we close out today? All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I mean, Bethany, Chris, Caron, Dr. Roberts are wonderful. Gretchen, and we're going to be revisiting some of these topics. We are going to be posting a link where you can submit questions, and then myself and Gretchen for part 2 will be at Ludington Library in May, doing another presentation and Q&A and just conversations with parents, because we think that these conversations need to happen more, and we're going to push the envelope so that they do. So thank you, everyone, for just being a part of, and this was amazing.
If anyone listening is prompted, you're listening to this as a parent and you're listening to us talk to each other. But if you are thinking, wow, I really wish I could ask this question, you're going to have an opportunity to do that, because we're going to post something at the end of this where you can now get involved. You'll just be stuck with me and Eric. Sorry. We're great. It's fine.
We'll get everyone on speakerphone.
That's right. Yeah, you guys will get dragged in. I'll be like, it's like, what is it? What's that one game show where you could call in someone if you don't have the answer?
Yeah, phone a friend.
Who wants to be a millionaire?
Who wants to be a millionaire?
Yeah, you'd be like, I'm calling, is Karen LENGEL there? I gotta, yeah. All right, guys, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.